Well, my 45 cuts didn't come out as clean as I'd hoped. Maybe a bit of bad measuring or something like that, but the good news is I've got more metal than less metal, so I can always trim it back a bit more. So what I'm going to do is measure the midway point. So I did that on the long edge and then marked it round, so where that red pencil is. From there I figured out just how much I needed on the inside of my box. So we're now going to mark where my target is and we'll see just how far out we are. There we go, so that's where the inside edge of my 45 ought to be. So need to get rid of all of that. That's looking a bit better now. It'll be close enough by the time we weld it all up. I bought an 80 amp inverter arc welder since that size fitted into my budget. It claims to be able to weld steel up to 5mm thick, but I guess you'd have to be a seasoned welder to get it to work with metal that thick. I'm mostly working with a 3mm wall, so I reckon I can coax it through this job. It's a pretty small little unit. There's a ruler just for scale, about 10cm wide. It's less than 4 kilos as well, pretty light. But before I start on the stand, it's a good idea to practice. So here's my first run of test welds. So learnt a couple of things from it. Surface preparation is critical. It really doesn't like to strike up a weld unless you prep your surface good. I had this running at about 70 amp or thereabouts. So penetration seems to work better when there's a gap in the between the two bits of metal. Come on, focus. Yeah. So there's a bit of a gap there, and we've got penetration all the way through. Whereas up this end here, the metal was butted together pretty flush, and penetration hasn't been as good there. So we need to get that weld to go deep in the piece of metal, so that it's holding it, not just a sort of a thin cap on the top surface. That's not going to be much use. But yeah, so that makes it quite clear that I've got a fair bit of prep work to go, just preparing all the joints for starting the weld. One of the other things I found was that if I move the stick too quick, sort of like that, it really didn't penetrate much at all. So I've got to slow down in how quickly I drag the welding stick along the joint. I'll do a bit more practice before I start on the actual stand. Here's a sequence of practice welds with a fade to white transition between each shot. I've just grabbed the money shots for your viewing pleasure. That one seems to work a bit better. So you can see we've just done a single run there, but we've got pretty good penetration, came right through there. Got a nice sort of corner welded off there, so this is, haven't ground it off or anything, just knocked a bit of the slag away. This corner one seems to have done alright as well. Have a look at the top edge of our 45-degree cut. We need to turn this into this for all our joins. I'll spare you the hours of footage. There's a fair bit of leftover oil from the boring process. This has caught a fair few filings, so now's the best time to clean this up before we start welding it all together. So you can see we've got a nice V profile in there now, so that should work a bit better, hopefully. Anyway, we'll give it a go. I start welding the frame with some small tack welds in the corners, just to hold things together. I do a remeasure of my diagonals to make sure my frame is still square. I then do a final mark off for the beams that the mill will sit on. We'll have to grind away the blue paint to allow the welds to take properly. It's a bit tricky finding a place to attach the earth clamp, so I sat the frame up on some timber so I could clamp it onto the leg holes while I welded up the other side a bit. Stay tuned for part 3. You can even subscribe to my channel if you like.